Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Girls like Adriana never paid attention to guys like Michael. And it wasn't because Adriana was hot and he wasn't hot. Not at all. Michael's looks were not God's fault. Rather, on the contrary, generously endowed. The guy was characterized by a tall, athletic figure, open, handsome face with expressive eyes and a winning smile. Looking at him, invariably wanted to smile back. Girls always liked Michael. Since childhood, they flirted with him, wrote love notes and put it in his briefcase, treated him with apples and tangerines. Michael himself treated the increased attention from the girls rather indifferently. He was not interested in all this nonsense. His mother constantly insinuated to him that the most important thing he should think about. It's about doing well in school. You've got to get a good education, son. Every day his mother said, or God forbid you'll be like me. His mother worked as a janitor. She too had once dreamed of higher education, of a career, of a happy and successful future. She planned to go to the capital after graduation and enter the institute. But it did not work out. Having met her father Michael in the capital, among other applicants, the young provincial fell in love and completely lost her head. The guy charmed her, had fun, and when he found out that the girl is pregnant, threw in her face crumpled money bills for abortion and said, "Never again get in my face. You wanted to catch me pregnant, but you can't. You got the wrong guy. I'm not going to marry you. We don't know who this baby's from. Maybe I had nothing to do with it." The poor thing never had an abortion, but she couldn't go to school because she was pregnant. She had to think about how to survive in a big city, how to raise a child alone. She had nowhere to wait for help. Betty hid her situation from her parents to the last. But they still knew the rumors quickly spread. And when they found out, they cursed their daughter with the very last words and strictly forbade her to appear in her hometown, where she was born and raised. "Don't you dare come back. You will not be disgraced," they said. "We won't be able to look our neighbors in the eye." They would point their fingers at us and laugh that our only daughter turned out to be a prostitute. Betty was willing to take any job, and in the end she was lucky enough to be hired as a janitor. She worked until she gave birth, swinging a broom, picking up trash. She cleaned the sidewalks from leaves in the fall and the summer, and from snow in the winter. No one cared that a pregnant woman was engaged in hard physical labor. Even the bosses turned a blind eye to it. She works and it's fine. She doesn't complain. The working day was 14 hours from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. The territory had to be cleaned very often because there were real pigs among the tenants. Garbage was thrown out of the car right on the move, out of the windows, even if there was a trash can nearby. Some passers-by could throw cigarette butts right under the girl's feet. Betty endured, swallowing her tears, and honestly tried to keep the area entrusted to her clean. However, the tenants still complained and were dissatisfied. No matter how hard the janitor tried, somebody's work was bound to be bad for him. Not too quickly emptied the trash cans, not very sharply waved the shovel, clearing the passage to the entrances from the snow. She was always to blame for everything. She was paid almost nothing, but she was provided with a tiny room in which she could barely fit a chair, a table, a closet, and a bed. She was also entitled to a free hot lunch, but Betty skimped on breakfast and dinner. When her due date came, she went to the hospital straight from the station. At the hospital, her biggest worry was getting back to work as soon as possible. Luckily, Michael was born healthy and strong and didn't give her much trouble. Like a perfect baby, he did nothing but eat and sleep for the first few months of his life. Betty had plenty of milk too. At least that was lucky. She didn't have to spend a lot of money on formula. A few days later, the mother and child were discharged, and the very next day she started working again, putting the stroller where Michael slept next to her, and continuing to swing a broom or a shovel or wrapping a shawl around the baby like a gypsy and carrying it right on top of her. Would you at least feel sorry for the baby? Fool. She was chastised by the residents who cared for her. If you don't feel sorry for yourself, we're fine. The young mother laughed. The child from morning to night under my care, in addition in the fresh air. Of course, kind people helped in any way they could. They gave Betty old toys, their children's clothes, bought diapers. Someone brought a crib. The young mother could not hold back her tears of gratitude, all her strength and resources she now spent on her son. She really wanted to raise him to be a good and decent man. And most importantly, that he would enter an institute and get a profession, with the help of which he could earn a living. God forbid that I should be left with nothing, Betty repeated in fear. Son, you must have a very different happy destiny. Michael was very attached to his mother. He always thought he had the best, the most beautiful, and the kindest. However, growing up, the boy more than once was surprised to notice that people around him treat his mother without respect, and at best do not notice her at all. At worst, they treat her like dirt underfoot, looking down on her, not even a nod in response to her timid hello. It made him terribly angry and offended him. Aren't all professions important and necessary? He asked his mother. Betty shook her head. All are necessary, but not all are prestigious. I want you to have a very good and respected profession. Michael is a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Promise me you'll do well in your studies and never let me down. Michael nodded. I promise. He was indeed a small and capable boy. The kindergarten teachers, and later the teachers at school, couldn't get enough of him. You're Michael, he's a real smarty pants. They tell her at parent-teacher conferences. And the mother blushed with embarrassment and pride. As time went on, Michael grew up, becoming an inquisitive and intelligent teenager. Thanks to his wit and charm, he made many friends at school. Except that he was the son of a janitor. His mother strictly forbade him to talk. But why was the boy surprised? What's wrong with that? Janitors make the world cleaner and better. The mother shook her head sadly. You don't understand, honey, if they find out who I am. They'll laugh at you and stop talking to you. No one wants to be friends with the janitor's son. Believe me, Michael did. As time went on, he himself became adroit at avoiding any conversation or even mentioning his mother in conversations with friends. It wasn't that he was ashamed of her, he just didn't say anything about her. Sometimes one of his new acquaintances would ask him what your mother did for a living. Michael quickly replied that she worked in a firm and hurried to keep the subject quiet. Fortunately, he was never questioned in detail. And about his father, he always answered that he died. Michael graduated from school brilliantly with a gold medal. Thanks to the results of the exam, he was able to enter one of the best and prestigious universities of the capital. His mother could not be pleased. On the day when Michael officially became a student, she organized a celebration, ordered a delicious dinner from a restaurant, bought a cake in the best pastry shop. Why did you spend so much money? Michael shook his head. You always told me to save money, but not today. The mother's eyes sparkled with happiness. Onaya literally glowed. I'm proud of you, my son. You're my joy, my hope, my everything. Student life had Michael in a tizzy. He immediately made a lot of new friends, buddies. The girls, as usual, went crazy. Only Michael's heart was captivated. The beautiful Adriana, who was in the same class with him. But in another group, when he first saw her on the porch of the institute, he thought that an angel Adriana descended from heaven to earth. She was amazingly beautiful. Blue eyes with long lashes. Thick golden braid, slender figure, he even caught his breath when he saw her. Noticing his reaction, classmate Ethan laughed. That two from Adriana are smacked. Michael perked up. Do you know her? Ethan nodded. She and I were in the same class and we live near each other. He named the cottage community where all the business elite and creative bohemians of the capital usually lived. Michael already knew that Ethan was a major. His father was a tough businessman, owner of a chain of expensive restaurants. So, Adriana belonged to some rich and famous family too. However, he soon became convinced that Adriana was not an easy girl. She was always brought to classes by a personal driver in a luxury car and bowed to her mistress and opened the door. Adriana dressed not flashy, but stylish and expensive. Michael didn't know much about women's clothes, but he realized that Adriana's shoes alone were worth more than all of his and his mother's clothes. The closet, all his wit, his sense of humor, evaporated without a trace in Adriana's presence. His mouth was dry and his tongue refused to listen. It would seem easier to walk up and meet a pretty girl. But Michael could approach anyone but Adriana. Soon, Ethan noticed how his friend blushed and turned pale when he saw the girl in the corridors of the Institute. "Really, buddy?" He laughed. "Would he have told me right away that you like Adriana so much?" "Let me introduce you." Michael almost died of excitement. "That would be convenient," he muttered. Ethan shrugged philosophically. "What's there to be uncomfortable about? Just don't stand there like a statue in front of her. She'll think you're retarded." "That's easy to say." Yeah, Michael was numb when he saw her right next to him. "Meet Adriana," the friend said nonchalantly. "This is my classmate Michael. Please love and welcome." Adriana gave Michael a curious look that gave him goosebumps. "Nice to meet you," she nodded. Her voice was melodious and as beautiful as she was. Ethan himself shook him in the side. Michael squeezed out hoarsely. "Nice to meet you too." "Nice guy, only very modest," Ethan explained. Chuckling, Michael was ready to fall to the ground in shame and embarrassment. What was he really doing? He's acting like a complete asshole. However, Adriana did not laugh. Modest young men are rare these days, she said seriously. So annoying. Pompous narcissists and nerds. Ethan pretended he had to run away. Oops, he slapped his forehead defiantly. "I forgot I had important things to do." "Well, you'll have your own conversation. I gotta go. Have a nice stay." And before Michael knew it, his classmate was gone. He thought Adriana was going to say goodbye and leave. However, she continued to stand opposite the young man and looked at him with genuine interest. "Do you like studying here?" she finally asked. Michael nodded. "Yes, very much." "Do you?" "So far, yes. But they say it won't be as much fun during the session," she smiled. The boy chuckled. "That's right." There was another awkward pause. Michael tried hard to think of a topic of conversation to break the awkward silence. But as luck would have it, nothing interesting came to his mind. "What pairs do you have now?" The girl was the first to start the dialogue again. Michael shrugged. "None for today." "That's it, I have freedom too." Adriana was happy. "Are you in a hurry?" "Not really." Maybe she's blushing nicely. "Let's go to a cafe, sit and talk." "I don't feel like going home." Michael thought he'd misheard. That this beautiful girl had invited him to a cafe. "I eagerly withdrew." He finally convulsed again. She smiled contentedly. "There's a pretty good coffee shop around the corner. The cakes there are great, and the coffee is good too." "Do you like coffee?" "No, I don't think I do." Michael mumbled confusedly, not realizing what he was saying or what he had just been asked. Adriana laughed as if she were ringing crystal bells. "You're funny," she said approvingly, finally. "So what about the coffee?" "Coffee?" "Yes, all right," Michael replied with a smile. "Let's go then. Or maybe it's better if we use the first name." Michael nodded. "Let's go on a first name basis." Adriana shook her head. "Where is your car parked?" It hadn't even occurred to her that Michael might not have a car. He responded uncertainly. Then suddenly, he said he'd taken it to the service center for a brake job. Adriana looked at him worriedly and frowned. Alas, brakes are no joke. "How do you go to the Institute by cab?" Michael had no choice but to nod. Adriana sighed. "I still haven't gotten my license." "I have a driver." "I don't want to call him now. Let's just walk around the neighborhood." Michael nodded again. "Sure, let's do that." He almost died of happiness when Adriana took him under her arm to make it easier to walk. The coffee shop had wonderful coffee, delicious pastries, and a steep price tag. Michael's eyes widened at the price. When he opened the menu, he began to frantically calculate whether he had enough money for even the simplest pastry. How he'd have to treat Adriana to one if he didn't have enough money to pay for it. It would be embarrassing. The situation was truly anecdotal. Michael even remembered the famous story by Zoshchenko Aristocrat, when the gentleman did not have enough money in the buffet, and when the lady began to take the fourth cake, told her to put it back. It could not, of course, be said that Michael was completely destitute. Although he did not take money from his mother, his conscience did not allow it. He still had some income. He worked as a courier and a pizza delivery boy. He was no stranger to any kind of work. but his mother didn't like it at all. She wanted her son to do only some noble, intellectual labor. "If you need money, say many times," she said, "Michael, that I will not earn. My arms and legs are in place, thank God." But Michael never once asked her for money, preferring to earn it himself. And now, sitting at a table in a cozy coffee shop, in front of the most beautiful girl on earth, Michael realized that as never before he was close to failure. To confess to Adriana that he was a janitor's son and used to save money. But when Michael imagined saying that, he instantly broke out in a cold sweat. If she found out about his social status and financial situation, their acquaintance would be over before it began, and Adriana would run away from him. Could he let that happen? Of course not. He liked her too much to lose her so easily. "Picked something." Adriana smiled at him, looking over the menu book. He shrugged confusedly. "To be honest, I don't really like sweets," she perked up. "So there are meat pies, cheese pies, and spinach and potatoes on the menu. They're delicious. Take your pick, it's my treat." Michael felt the color burn down his face to the roots of his hair. Had she realized he was poor? "Why should she?" he muttered. "I can pay for it myself." "Oh, I'm sorry, I meant no harm." Adriana smiled guiltily and disarmingly. "I don't mean you can't. It's just that I'm the one who brought you here. So it's my treat too." "What are you, a feminist?" Michael asked just in case. But Adriana laughed again. "What kind of feminist?" "Of course I'm not. It's just fair. I invited you, I'm paying. Next time you take me out and pay for it yourself. God, it's such a small thing." Well, I mean, it wasn't a small thing to Michael. No, it wasn't. But saying next time you'll take me out. He felt a warmth spreading through his heart. So she's planning to see him again, expecting him to ask her out. That was hopeful and optimistic. "All right, it's a deal," Michael nodded. And to seal the deal, he added firmly that next time I'd pick the place. And my treat. They drank coffee with really tasty cakes and ate some ice cream. Ice cream. And all the while they talked nonstop. But there was a little bit of a hitch at first. Adriana told me about her family. Her father was the owner of a huge company, which was engaged in the construction of elite housing in the most prestigious and expensive areas of the city. Her mom devoted herself to charity, telling Michael all this information. Adriana, in turn, asked who his parents were. She didn't want to lie, but she didn't want to tell the truth even more. So it was necessary to tell a slightly embellished truth. So Michael, instead of saying that his father left his mother pregnant, out of habit, evasively answered that he had died long ago, and when asked about his mother's work, he traditionally said that she worked in a cleaning company. Cool. Adriana's eyes sewed. She has her own cleaning company. Michael nodded. Well, you could say that. Of course she has her own cleaning company. What about the back room where all the cleaning equipment was kept? Broom, buckets, shovel, hose. Meanwhile, Adriana kept asking, and you'll be running the company. You have a family business. Michael shook his head. I'm not sure. I'm more interested in technology. After that, the talk about parents thankfully stopped, and they started talking about all sorts of things, movies, books, music. And here Michael was surprised and happy to discover that he and Adriana had a surprising amount in common. They were very easy and good with each other. They talked and couldn't get enough of each other. They understood each other half-heartedly and were on the same wavelength. Michael was even more enchanted by Adriana, convinced that there was no better girl than her. When the waitress brought the bill, Adriana, as promised, paid for the meal herself. Michael still felt terribly awkward, though. He swore to himself that in the near future he would save up money and invite the girl to a nice restaurant of the level to which she was accustomed. Michael realized that he wouldn't be able to pretend to be a major for long. Adriana was not stupid. She would soon reveal him, but he wanted to delay this moment until the last moment, as long as he could, because he knew that as soon as Adriana found out the truth, she'd cut off all communication with him. They left the coffee shop and walked leisurely down the sidewalk. Adriana pulled an expensive smartphone out of her purse with a sigh. It was time to call a driver. She said with a noticeable sadness, I don't want to say goodbye, but the words don't make me want to go home. Michael felt like the happiest person in the world. I don't feel like saying goodbye either. He nodded. Are you going to call a cab? Adriana asked. Michael was a little confused. Actually, he would have gotten home on public transportation just fine. But he couldn't admit it. Yes, I'll call right away, he said with a hitch. Adriana waved her hand. No need for a cab. We'll give you a ride home. I mean my driver. Michael was embarrassed and confused. He started to protest. No, that's okay. Thank you. I'll get there myself. Why bother a man and waste his time? But the girl was adamant. Oh, come on. He's being paid for this, after all. The driver didn't show a shadow of surprise. When the landlady told him, William, we'll take this young man first, and then we'll go home. He only nodded briefly. You have to do it. Where do you live? Adriana asked. Tell me the address. Michael was even more embarrassed. It was painful to admit that he lived in a small house. You can drop me off on the sidewalk, he muttered. Why do you have to go 3 yards? Don't be silly, Adriana said. We'll take you all the way to the front door. All the way. Michael wasn't himself, was he? He imagined how his deception would be revealed, how he would laugh. Adriana and the driver must even be unfazed. There's a house in the yard. Uncertainly waved his hand when they reached his neighborhood house number. Which entrance? The driver clarified. In a completely calm tone. He was not shocked by anything he saw around him, but Michael was clearly surprised. But Adriana was clearly surprised and was now looking curiously at the identical brick buildings of 5 floors. Apparently, this was not how she had imagined the place where the son of the cleaning company owner lived. You live here? She asked incredulously. Michael looked at his yard with her eyes, a yard overgrown with tall poplars, grandmothers on benches by the porches, a playground with shabby swings and a slide. Yes, he answered, and suddenly, unexpectedly for himself, lied. I'm renting. Since you moved out of your mother's house, so you don't live with your mother. Adriana wondered. No, Michael shook his head. I don't want to depend on her and her money. I want to support myself on my own. Adriana's eyes flashed with admiration. Look, you're so cool, she exhaled. I couldn't do that. You're used to comfort, to a life of luxury, and to give it all up to live on your own. I respect that. He was pleased by her praise, and at the same time a little ashamed of his lie. Of course, now it would be much easier to explain to her that he wasn't as rich as she imagined him to be. But then again, he wasn't as independent as he described to her. Still lives with her mother, and hides from everyone that she's a janitor. I was feeling really bad about myself. Pulling the door handle, Michael hurried out of the car and said goodbye. Goodbye. Thanks for the ride. Michael, wait. Adriana jumped out after him. Why don't we exchange phone numbers? Just in case, she added, blushing sweetly. I realize we'll see each other at the university tomorrow anyway. But just in case. Okay, smiled Michael. Let's trade, son. Who was that who gave you a ride home today? Asked his mother, who came home from work in the evening. The neighbors said a very expensive car and a beautiful girl, Betty added meaningfully. Michael jerked his shoulder uncertainly. No big deal. A friend. We studied together. Mom smiled enigmatically, noticing how her son blushed involuntarily. But all she said was, I see. Michael messaged Adriana all evening and half the night, just like in the coffee shop. They chatted about everything and couldn't get enough of each other. She was an amazingly sweet girl after all. It would be a shame to lose her. In the end, Michael thought absent-mindedly, as he fell asleep in the morning, that he could not do without Ethan's help. He decided to talk to him tomorrow at the university. In the morning, Michael almost stumbled when he saw Adriana sitting on the bench. She sat wiggling her foot in a dainty, expensive shoe and was obviously waiting for Michael's surprise. She shouted cheerfully, noticing how shocked the young man was. What are you doing here? He asked and glanced nervously at the door. Mom was going to be there any minute. She left the apartment almost immediately, and after him she just fiddled with the lock. Don't you get it? She laughed in surprise. I'm waiting for you. But why did he look at the door again? To go to the university together, of course. She explained to him like a child. "Why do you have to take a cab?" She nodded a little to the side. Michael saw a familiar car with William at the wheel. Okay, he was surprisingly quick to agree. "Let's go." Adriana, apparently expecting that she would have to persuade him again. She was even a little taken aback. In fact, Michael agreed only because he wanted to get out of here, God forbid. Adriana had not crossed paths with his mother, but alas, he was too late. A greeting phrase he heard, felt the entryway door open behind him. And a split second later his mother's voice sounded. "Michael, you haven't left yet." He forced himself to turn around. Why couldn't you just fall through the ground when you wanted it the most? Meanwhile, the mother was looking at Adriana with interest, standing next to her son. The mother's gaze was not concealed by the girl's expensive clothes, the cool car, and the driver in a strict suit behind the wheel. She herself looked, to put it bluntly, simple, just about to sweep the yard and dressed in an old tracksuit, which was already 100 years old. Michael had no idea how he was going to explain everything to Adriana. That's his mom, the Millionaire cleaning company owner. I muttered, Michael confused, then turned to Adriana this. But his mother suddenly came to his rescue. "Hello," she sang cheerfully, "and I'm Michael's neighbor." We live in the same entrance. From surprise and shock, Michael glared at his mother with his eyes, asking her, "What are you talking about?" However, she winked at him as if nothing had happened and continued lying. Usually Michael is already running away at this time. A very studious, intelligent boy, always in such a hurry to study. So I was surprised he was still in the yard. Adriana relaxed and nodded. "Yeah, well, we were just about to go to school with him." Michael didn't know whether to be happy that his mother had stepped in and helped him or sad. He seemed to be more and more confused by his lies. And the worst thing was that he was unbearably ashamed in front of his mother for not laying siege to her, for not interrupting this stupid game, for graciously letting her pretend to be his neighbor, pretending that they were strangers to each other, in fact, people. "Shall we go?" he asked Adriana. It was a little abrupt. The girl looked at him with some surprise, but then nodded. Yes, of course. All the way to the university, Michael was mostly silent. There was a feeling of awkwardness in the car. Finally, Adriana timidly raised her voice. "Michael, didn't you like that I came here? You look so upset." A look of genuine distress froze on her pretty face. He glanced at her. Michael softened. "Yeah, it's okay. To be honest, I'm not much for surprises, but it's okay. I'm not mad at you." Really, was she so genuinely happy that Michael felt like a total asshole? I know I can get a little carried away sometimes. If I want something, I go for it like a tank. Adriana laughed, especially if I want to get something I like. "Daddy always scolds me for it," she added. Guilty. Michael smiled involuntarily. The girl's sincerity brought him back. She, unlike himself, was honest with him. "What do you want to get now? What do you like?" he asked. Adriana fluttered her eyelashes in embarrassment and lowered her head. "Not what, but who?" "You, of course." Michael caught his breath. "You like me," he said with difficulty. "Well, of course I do. Or do you think I come home to all the guys?" Adriana pouted resentfully. "No, of course not." Michael smiled and took her hand. "I don't think so." "I do. I like you too." He received such a happy look and a radiant, grateful smile in return. He immediately forgot about the awkward episode with his mother, or rather not forgot, but decided not to pay attention to it. Well, she introduced herself as his neighbor, not his mother, so as not to scare the girl away. But it was her own choice, her own initiative. Michael didn't force her to do it. Yeah, and let's face it, it's not a good idea. If he had told the truth, that this old woman in a stretchy tracksuit was his mother, who knows whether he would be sitting in her car with Adriana now or not? They were in different classes, so they regretfully said goodbye until the end of the lecture. Michael, meanwhile, decided to ask Ethan for help. As Ethan had planned the day before, he told his friend, "You love all those nightclubs, don't you? Can you bring me up to speed? What is the most fashionable and popular among the golden youth now? Where do they hang out? Where do you go? Why do you want to know?" Ethan was surprised. You're a smart, model boy. You're an honor student who's going on a bender. I'm not doing it for me. Michael shook his head. For Adriana, I want to take her to some fancy place so she'll like it. She's probably sick of those clubs herself. Ethan shrugged, taking her to a theater or a classical concert. Whatever's closer to you. Why are you trying to pretend to be something you're not? I know you're not interested in nightclubs, and you can't afford them, sorry to be blunt. Michael sighed sadly. That's just it, Ethan. Adriana thinks. Well, she thinks I'm a rich kid like you. Ethan pulled his eyes out. What? And you laughed. Hearing that laughter was hurtful, but Michael knew he had no right to be offended now. She thought so, and I didn't try to dissuade her. Now I have to keep that illusion alive in her. Why should you? Ethan asked, genuinely perplexed. Just be yourself. Honestly, you'll have a much better chance of getting her to like you. Say it honestly, honestly. Michael sighed immediately, remembering his mother's words that his friends would immediately stop talking to him if they knew his mother was a janitor. Honestly, you can't. But she'll find out very quickly. Ethan patted his friend's shoulder sympathetically. What kind of a major are you? It's ridiculous. You even dress differently in other stores. And you, Michael, he felt the color of shame burn into his cheeks. But he did finish the sentence. Can't you lend me some of your clothes, the ones you don't wear anymore? He added hastily. Ethan was silent for a long time. Michael realized how humiliating he looked with his request, but there was nothing to be done. Why do you like Adriana so much? He finally asked. Michael nodded and quietly answered more than just liking. I've never had feelings like that for anyone. Okay, reluctantly, Ethan nodded. I honestly don't like this idea at all, but so be it. I'll help you become one of us. Thank you, exhaled a happy Michael. What was there to be thankful for? Ethan sighed. I'm telling you. I wish you'd just come clean with her right away. Otherwise, it's only going to get worse. Michael sighed. It's too late to confess. Ethan shook his head. His buddy took his transformation seriously. The first thing he did was to take Michael to a salon, where he had his hair cut according to the latest fashion trends and styled. Now Michael's head was an artistic mess. But it looked not sloppy, but really flawless. Looking at the result in the mirror, Michael didn't even recognize himself at once. And Ethan whistled at the sight of him. Quite a different person, became a handsome man. The haircut and styling in this salon cost, by Michael's standards, just some unrealistic money. But Ethan said it was worth it. Soon Michael was convinced of the truth of his words. When Adriana first saw the young man with the new hairstyle, she opened her eyes wide, opened her mouth, and then smiled. With such sincerity, admiration that he felt goosebumps running through his body. Michael, are you like this? That's what the girl said, even though she couldn't find the right words. You look great. You look great. Then Ethan started on Michael's closet. He didn't have money for new brand-name clothes, but his buddy had given him a bunch of his own clothes, which he hardly ever wore. Gave it away for free. I wouldn't get used to that. Ethan grinned good-naturedly. Sorry, friend, but you can't afford it. But he hesitated. Unless you charm Adriana and get her into a wedding agency. The very thought that someone might think he was dating Adriana for the money made Michael more than a little angry. Do you think I'm just looking for a rich bride? He asked glumly. Ethan shrugged nonchalantly. Well, why not? Everybody wants money. I don't blame you. And you're lucky. Adriana's cute. Some people marry ugly people. If they have a rich daddy and a lot of money in their account. Michael turned red with anger. Ethan, don't you dare talk about her and me, even in jest, he exclaimed. Don't you understand anything? Adriana is a really special girl to me, and I don't care at all how much money she has. I would date her even if she was a pauper. Ethan smiled good-naturedly. Wow, what a passion. All right, don't get so worked up. I believe you. But will they believe you? Adriana's parents. Parents? Michael asked, puzzled. Ethan nodded. Exactly. Because sooner or later she's going to want you to meet them. You don't think they'll expose you? It's Adriana who looks at you with amorous eyes and doesn't notice the obvious inconsistencies. But your legend of a millionaire mommy is a highly visible lie. Her daddy will probably do some research on you and find out that you're nothing but. He probably wanted to say some derogatory word, but ran into Michael's derogatory look and conciliated. Finished by a mere non-rich man. Michael took a deep breath. It's a long way from meeting my parents. Adriana and I are just getting started. I'll figure out how to get out of it later. Ethan gave him a meaningful look. You'll get confused. It'll be harder to come clean later. Michael flared up. Don't push it. I know he's not stupid. Okay, Ethan waved his hand. After all, it's your life. Do as you please. Within a month, no one knew. The former risk-taking, self-confident major. The old humble boy Michael. The change in him was truly dramatic. Classmates only opened their mouths when they saw how boldly he behaves, how he dresses, how he speaks, and how he looks. His mother was delighted with the changes occurring with her son. Are you so handsome, Michael? She sighed admiringly as she watched him getting ready for university in the morning. A real movie actor or a popular singer. He must have a lot of girls. Michael shrugged judiciously. Why do I need abstract girls? I'm only interested in Adriana. I don't care about the others. Adriana's mother nodded understandingly. That's the girl who came to our house that morning. Yes, she nodded Michael. And I love her. I wish I could meet her. Her mother started dreamily, but when she caught Michael's gaze, she quieted down. I mean, theoretically someday. She corrected herself quickly, not right away. I realize that's not possible anytime soon. Michael looked at her carefully, as if seeing her for the first time. What's going to change? Why can't we do it now, and then we can? He asked. Will you find another profession? If you stop swinging the broom, you will become a respectable man in society. I won't be ashamed to introduce you to my friends. Betty blushed. I meant that. Of course you did. And that it was me. Betty laughed, trying to hide how much her son's words hurt and offended her. Of course, I don't want to embarrass you in front of your friends or your girlfriend. No dating. Of course, Michael didn't notice that he had caused his mother heartache. That's better. He nodded contentedly. Adriana's parents, on the other hand, insisted on meeting her boyfriend. The girl had been talking about her boyfriend at home, and her father and mother were eager to see him. So invite him over on Sunday. Her mother suggested we have lunch and talk, get to know each other. Adriana was embarrassed and blushed. All right, I'll tell him, but promise not to push him too much with your questions. Michael is such a humble father, grinned the modest young man. That's pretty rare these days, I'll say that. He's a unique man. Well, invite him to admire your modest. When Michael heard of this invitation, he was horrified. I'm so screwed. Yes, Adriana's parents will immediately reveal that he is an imposter, that he is not the son of a cleaning company owner, but an ordinary, as they say nowadays, beggar. And of course, having learned about it, they will forbid Adriana to communicate with him. Surely not the kind of couple they dreamed for their daughter, noticing how tense he was, how nervous. Adriana wrote it off as the usual natural excitement before meeting her parents. A favorite girl. Don't be scared, you're laughing so hard, she told Michael. Nobody's gonna eat you. My mom and dad are really nice. Nice. He thought gloomily. Except that we're not on the same social ladder as them. Ethan, too, tried to cheer up his friend as best he could, but he couldn't resist a reproachful reminder. I warned you that the more you lie, the deeper you get. How are you going to get out of it now? Michael was desperately brave, pretending not to care. I'll think of something, he announced to the visitor. It didn't feel right to show up empty-handed. So Michael asked Adriana what her parents liked. It's not like he's going to bring a box of chocolates. Oh, don't worry too much. Adriana waved her hand. Everything in our house is simple. Except that Mom loves orchids and Dad loves French cognac. Not so simple. Orchids were the most expensive flowers at the florist. And the price of high-end liquor was nothing to talk about. But still, Michael gathered up all his savings and bought what Adriana was talking about. This dinner he later perceived as the most difficult exam in his life. Adriana's parents literally bombarded him with various questions, sometimes very provocative. He again had to lie about his father's death so that they would not ask about him. So Adriana's parents became interested in talking about his mother. So your mother is the owner of a cleaning company. Adriana's father William squinted. Well, not bad, not bad. How many people does she employ? About 100. Michael lied without blinking an eye. Adriana's parents looked at each other with respect. Wow, that's pretty solid. So you decided to follow in her footsteps. Are you going to work for your mother's company after college? No. Michael shook his head. I have my own plans. Michael is independent. Adriana said proudly and put her arm around his shoulders. He said he didn't want to depend on his mother's money. He doesn't take a dime from her. He earns everything himself and even lives on his own. He rents an apartment. What do you do for a living? Michael? William's interested. I'm a part-time programmer. Confused, Michael answered. However, he was honest about it. Indeed, I took a job half a month ago as an IT assistant in a modest office. But in the future, I plan to start my own company, of course, he added hastily. Commendable, nodded Adriana's father. Kathy's mother intervened. But it must be difficult for you. You were used to a certain level of comfort when you lived with your mother, and now you have to economize on everything. You don't have enough to live on, Michael answered cautiously. Not lavishly, of course. I even had to sell my car. But I can get everywhere by public transportation. I like your determination and honesty, don't you? Nodded William. So you know about computers? Yes, Michael, a real computer god. Adriana continued to praise him. What if you work for me? The man suddenly suggested. I really need a savvy computer and sysadmin in my office. I'm about to launch a website dedicated to my company's activities. In general, a competent specialist is required. Michael was confused. Is he offering him a job? Really? Adriana's father interpreted his silence in his own way. I don't know how much you are paid in your job now, but I'm offering you twice as much. Accept, Michael. Take it. Adriana whispered to him, her eyes rounded with joy. Michael nodded. Thank you for the offer. It sounds great. So it's a deal. William, satisfied, relaxed, leaned back in his chair. Yay. Adriana clapped her hands together. It's great that two of my favorite men will be working together. What are your intentions for our daughter? Unexpectedly, Kathy asked bluntly. Mom shrieked, girl, why do you start? I told you not to push. I'm not pushing, the woman shrugged. Just wondering. Michael looked boldly into her eyes. His intentions are serious, he said. Unless, of course, your daughter doesn't mind. I love her. Adriana blushed with pleasure and exhaled adoringly as she looked at him. I don't mind. Well, then we'd like to meet your mother. Michael? Kathy continued. Michael was confused. This was a turn of events he had never expected. What to do now? How do I get out of this? Maybe you and she could come and visit us next weekend. Or if it's possible, we'll pay you a return visit, so to speak, William smiled. Bringing Adriana's parents back to their home was a definite impossibility. Michael thought feverishly about how he could get out of such a delicate situation. Ethan was right. He was lying, and the fragile edifice he built with his lies was ready to collapse. It was about to collapse and crumble like a house of cards. I'm afraid. Michael finally got it out of him. It's impossible. Adriana's father's eyebrows rose in puzzlement at the impossibility. He interrogated. Why your mother? Isn't she in the capital? Yes, but Michael, what is it? Adriana frowned, concerned, took his hand. You don't want us to meet her? Maybe it's because I'm just an amusement to you, a toy. Maybe you lied about the seriousness of your intentions. Michael was scared. Of course I'm serious about you. It can't be more serious. He just hesitated, searching for the right words. My mom and I don't have a very good relationship. Adriana shook her head and looked at the young man suspiciously. You've never said that before. Michael guiltily spread his hands in a way he just didn't want to. It was embarrassing to admit such a thing. My mother and I practically do not communicate since I began to live separately. But why? William wondered. Michael felt as if everyone was about to hear the squeak of his doddering brain. Trying to think of a less convincing answer, she resented me for not wanting to continue her business. He blurted out. Finally, a warm place in her company was already prepared for me. But I said that I wanted to earn my own money and live on my own. I guess she never forgave me for that. We hardly ever see each other. We only call each other once every 6 months at the most. There was silence over the table. Well, it happens. William finally exhaled. Parents are sometimes so selfish, wanting their children to follow in their footsteps, without even caring what they think about it. I hope that someday your mom will change her mind and not be so categorical. He winked slyly at his daughter. If our families suddenly become related, Adriana blushed to the roots of her hair again. Come on, Papa, she exclaimed pitifully. I asked you why you'd even say we'd intermarry. Michael and I haven't looked that far into the future. We're just really good together. Did Michael suddenly feel incredibly brave? Why? He said, I'd like to marry you very much. I know for a fact that I don't need anyone else in my life but you, and since we're together anyway, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask your parents for your hand in marriage. Adriana gasped and put her hand over her mouth. Tears of happiness splashed from her eyes. Her parents looked at each other with good-natured smiles. Well, I like your honesty, Michael, said William at last. I can see that you are a good, decent, and responsible young man, and certainly not a dory hunter, he grinned. At those words, Michael felt a chill run down his spine. If only they all knew the truth about who he really was, a pathetic bum who had tricked his way into society and was now shaking with fear of being discovered. The rest of the evening passed like a blur. Michael berated himself for not holding back. Who had pulled his tongue? Why had he proposed? No, of course, he still loved Adriana more than anything in the world. And in his dreams, of course, he wanted to live his whole life with her. But why was he in such a hurry? He needed to at least get on his feet and start earning well enough to provide Adriana with the standard of living she was accustomed to. And then there was the worm of conscience gnawing at him. For lying about his mother after all she'd done for him, not eating, not sleeping, giving him the best bite, going without boots for the winter and buying him a coat. And he disowned her so easily, saying they weren't in touch. And now what about the wedding? Is he not going to let Mom come even then? Will he hide her from everyone? Adriana noticed the change in his mood. What's the matter with you? She whispered to him. It seems as if you're not happy to talk about marriage. Michael, it's not like I'm forcing you into a wedding agency, she added, a little offended. It was your initiative in the first place. Michael came to his senses, pulled the girl to him and hugged her. I'm sorry. Of course I'm glad. In fact, I'm happy. I really want to marry you, I just don't feel well. Adriana touched his forehead anxiously. I think your forehead is hot. Listen, stay with us tonight. You can sleep in the guest room. I don't want to let you go like this, do I? No, Michael said fearfully. I'm going home, I need to get some rest. And at the same time to think about what to think about. She asked cautiously. The details of our future wedding, of course, he found the strength to smile. Don't worry, I'm fine. Already at home, Michael finally realized what a wild adventure he'd gotten himself into. He had proposed. He'd lied to a millionaire's daughter about being a millionaire's son. How was he supposed to get out of this web of lies? No, of course, Ring came up with a good story that he and his mother hadn't spoken in a long time. But it's not like he was ever rich. And sooner or later, Adriana's family will realize that, and then their worst fears will be confirmed. They'll think he's just after their daughter's fortune. He told Ethan about his trouble, and he shook his head with genuine sympathy. Yeah, buddy, you're in trouble. I told you you should have come clean from the start. Now it's too late. Listen, your mother's coming to the wedding anyway. You can't not invite her, can you? Michael slapped his forehead. I know. How could he not have thought of that? No matter how strained the relationship was. And to ignore the marriage of her only son, no mother could dress her up as a business lady. Ethan asked doubtfully. Michael only waved his hand hopelessly. What business lady? It's not just about clothes. Rich ladies look and act differently. They are well-groomed with a fresh face thanks to expensive cosmetics and plastic surgery and a shiny mane of rich hair. His mother, on the other hand, has never worn makeup or had a manicure. She tucks her hair into a bundle. Her skin is dry and rough, and her face is already full of wrinkles. Michael felt ashamed when he pictured his quiet and shy mother at the same table with the socialites. She would be laughed at, and he wouldn't be there with her. It's decided his mother won't be at his wedding. He'd be sure to think of something. To be honest, Michael felt disgusted. And when he told his mother that he was getting married and saw her eyes light up in a flash, and when he warned her that there would be no guests at the wedding, there would be a modest signing to tell the truth that there would be guests after all. Only that no one will invite Mom, he still did not dare. But how so, son? She whispered, confused. Can I not even come to the wedding agency to look at your bride? I don't even know her. I don't know her parents either. I don't know anything at all. What kind of family? What kind of girl? Michael wrinkled his nose. Adriana's parents are abroad, and I'll introduce you to her. Sometime later. Mom, really, we don't want any guests. We want to have a quiet and humble wedding together. Do we have the right? Yes, of course you do, Betty mumbled. But it was obvious that she was terribly upset. Michael felt like a scoundrel, a traitor, and a worthless son. Because of his lies, Michael was so confused that he had not invited the most beloved person to the wedding. And he didn't even know now who to tell the truth to more terrible, Adriana and her parents, or his mother. In fact, the wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. But in reality, Michael felt a burning shame for all this masquerade he had started. At first, he wanted to organize a fairly modest wedding on the means. Even though he was now earning good money in William's company, it was still not the level to which Adriana was accustomed. But her parents insisted that they would make their modest contribution to the organization of the celebration. In the end, everything turned out to be very expensive and very rich, and there were at least 100 guests. The famous businessman was marrying off his only daughter. In the wedding agency, everything went for Michael as in a fog. Solemn speech of the registrar exchange of rings, the first kiss of the newlyweds. Adriana was beautiful in a white bride's dress, but Michael's happiness was still incomplete. Every now and then he squinted at the door of the registration hall, as if waiting. It was coming. It would swing open, and he would run in, out of breath. Mom then congratulated by a crowd of strangers and strangers alike. Camera flashes, popping champagne bottles, screaming. Riding in a limousine around the city, photo shoot. It's just the way it's supposed to be. It's all on the up and up. And Michael's heart still lurked in longing. He wasn't having any fun at the restaurant. Michael kept thinking that now he was sitting at a luxurious table, eating all kinds of delicacies, and his mother was spending the evening alone in their small apartment, which Michael would never return to, because Adriana's parents had given them their own place. What's wrong with you? Worriedly, Adriana whispered to him. I feel like you're already regretting marrying me. Michael shook his head. Of course I don't regret you. It's just that he didn't finish. His attention was drawn to the guard, who was approaching the table and looking for the groom. Excuse me, he said, confused. There's a strangely dressed woman at the entrance. She claims she's here for the wedding and that she's... He hesitated for a moment. That she's your mother. Michael broke out in a cold sweat. Mom's here. It can't be. How did she know? It's not like he told her the address of the restaurant. Adriana's father heard those words too and became interested. Really? Michael, your mother decided to come after all. That's great. Call her quickly. Michael didn't even have time to object. He felt like he was suffocating. Even his tie seemed to be pressing him with a merciless stranglehold. That was it. Now everyone would know that he was the son of a simple janitor. All the guests will be shocked. Adriana's parents are furious. Adriana herself, he couldn't even think about it. Betty stepped hesitantly into the restaurant and lingered around, trying to find Michael with her eyes. Hundreds of interested and mocking looks stared back at her. Michael could see that his mother had dressed up for the occasion, styled her hair, put on almost her only dress to replace her perpetual tracksuit. Instead of sneakers, she wore shoes. But still, against the background of all these rich socialite ladies in luxurious evening dresses, well-groomed, prosperous, she looked pathetic, and she seemed to realize it. Michael felt a lump in his throat and a burning shame. Why was he putting his mother through this terrible ordeal? How could he call himself a good son after this? Michael, who muttered that? Adriana stunned. It's my mom, he said firmly and walked away from the table to stand next to his mother. Forgive me, son, for showing up so arbitrarily to be a mother. But I couldn't not be at your wedding. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't invite you, he mumbled, kissing her hands. He didn't care that everyone was staring at them, some in shock, some in bewilderment, and some with squeamishness. I understand why you did it, she whispered. Where am I and where are your new relatives? Don't say that, he shook his head. You're the best, and me, I'm just a jerk. I've been acting like that to you. By the way, how did you find us? Suddenly, William's voice came from across the table. I told her. Michael thought he'd misheard. You, he muttered. You knew? The father-in-law grinned. Well, of course I knew. Did you think, son, that before I married off my only adored daughter, I wouldn't go through the information about her fiancé and his family? I knew from the beginning who you were and who your mother really worked for. Michael was completely confused. But how did you let this wedding happen? Michael squeezed himself out. William smiled. Yes, because he could see that you really did genuinely love each other. You didn't seem like a money grubber. You've been a smart guy in my office. I've been watching you work. I'm sure you'll go far. But hiding your mother from all of us for so long is not good. All the guests listened to this conversation with interest. They even stopped chewing. Don't you realize why I've been hiding it? Michael muttered. The father-in-law grinned. Of course I do. That's why I wasn't in a hurry to declassify you. I could see you were embarrassed. Not every young man can admit that his mother works as a janitor. It echoed around the table. The guests were completely discouraged. Michael looked at Adriana's face and saw that she was shocked too. Look at her shoes, the ladies with silicone lips and eyelashes murmured. The bag is a godsend. Mom, under all the whispers and cross eyes, shrank back as if she were smaller in stature. Michael hugged her cheerfully by the shoulders, as if trying to show her I'm here with you. The father-in-law left the table, approached Michael's mother, and gallantly kissed her hand. There is nothing dishonorable in any profession, he announced, addressing the guests. If a man earns his bread honestly, how do we know what paths led this woman to her work? And what right have we to judge? He gave the guests such a stern look that all those who were giggling quietly in their fists instantly shut up. Many of you ladies, continued William, have not worked a day in your lives. You lead idle, luxurious lives solely because of your husbands. And this woman, he turned to Michael's mother, raised a fine son without a dime from his father. I myself, before I made my first million, did not shy away from any work, as a loader, a courier, not as a janitor, said someone mockingly. And what is wrong with the profession of a janitor? Entered into the conversation until now silent. Michael, do you think all this cleanliness comes by itself? If there were no janitors, in a week all your yards would be overgrown with mud and covered with garbage. It's easy to devalue what you don't notice. I got up from the table and walked over to them. I married you, William, precisely because you weren't afraid of any work. She turned to her husband. And you didn't think any labor was unworthy of you. Michael, she turned her gaze to her new son-in-law. You were ashamed to tell us the truth. We would have understood you and not judged you. Thank you, Michael murmured and squeezed his mother's hand tighter. He felt her fingers trembling timidly in his palm. He felt pity for her, standing there shaking with fear because of a bunch of pompous fools and fools who are not worth her little finger. He found his eyes on his young wife. I wonder how Adriana felt about the news that his mother was a janitor. Michael was ready for anything, even for the fact that she would hate him for lying. However, the girl looked at him without hatred or anger. She was just very sad. Are you disappointed? Careful, he asked her. I'm sorry, please. I don't know why I got so wound up myself. Adriana shook her head, not disappointed. She corrected him. I'm just disappointed that you don't trust me that much. What do you mean? He didn't understand. Did you really think I wouldn't understand and accept your mom? Exclaimed the girl. Did you doubt me? Michael felt his mother standing next to him sobbing. At that very moment, Adriana also ran up to them and hugged her mother-in-law tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for such a beautiful son. I love him more than life, and I promise that he will be happy with me." That's when Betty burst into tears. Everyone rushed over to comfort her. Then they led her cheerfully to the table. The wedding party started again, and now Michael was really happy, without reservations. The happiest day of his life. The most dear person in the world was next to him, his beloved mother.